Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar on dealing with eating disorders, coping with eating disorders. I'm really happy to see so many of you here today. My name is Elissa Makris, and I'm a business psychologist at Thrive. And today with me, I have Ruth Bailey, who works for Derbyshire NHS. Hi, Ruth. How are you?
Hi, Elissa. I'm really well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. So yeah, this is a really sensitive subject, of course, and some of the topic areas that we'll be covering during this webinar, they might trigger some of you, or you might feel that you identify with some of the things that we'll be discussing. Just know that the aim of this webinar is to empower people to feel more confident to address this topic and to gain more knowledge about it so they can seek the right help and the support that they need. So we will talk more about support and signposting at the end of this webinar, but if you feel that you need to maybe leave earlier, I will send some signposting options through the chat as well. So please don't hesitate to contact them if you need to. Okay, so this webinar should be around 1 hour long. We'll have a Q&A session at the end. And if you want to have some discussions amongst each other or bring in some points, please use the chat function and please use the Q&A box for any questions that we will get to in the end. So yeah, as said before, I have Ruth here with me. Ruth is a staff wellbeing officer at Derbyshire Community Health Services, and she has also lived experience with anorexia nervosa. She's here to give us her story and to help us understand how we can support others better as well. So thank you for being here. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about yourself and about your background?
Yeah, thank you, Elissa. So you've explained it beautifully there, actually, but just a bit on my background. So I entered into the arts world many years ago now. I left home when I was 11 years old to pursue my dream to become a professional ballerina. And of course, with all that work comes commitment, dedication. I gave up quite a lot of my life to enter into that world, and I think my family gave up a lot. They sacrificed so much for me, and to this day I'm incredibly grateful for that. um, but yeah, like I said, with that world there comes an immense amount of pressure, um, and I have a personality that sort of is do everything or do none of it, and to the best of my ability, and that's what I did. And unfortunately it led down a path of self-destruct, and I became very, very poorly with anorexia nervosa, and which unfortunately ended my career. But to this day I have learned so much from that experience, and I've retrained to become a nutritionist. I wanted to know more about how to take care of my own body, but I also wanted to help other people that were maybe struggling with an eating disorder or had um, not great relationships with food, and had typical behaviours around food that would suggest they may be struggling. Um, so all in a nutshell, I've just wrapped all of my 20 years experience in a nutshell. But I think I have had so much experience within eating disorders within an industry that requires you to look a certain way. So that's where my journey actually all begun, and I'm sure we'll touch on that going forward in this webinar.
Yeah, definitely. We'll talk a little bit more about your experience and everything. And thank you so much. We really appreciate that you're sharing your personal story with us as well. And hopefully, it will encourage others to share their stories as well and help them to find the right help that they need.
Yeah.
So, the topics we'll be covering today are different types of eating disorders, as well as identifying eating disorders, the different thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that come along with them. What are the maintaining factors? What are the risk factors? the effect of lockdown as well as the holiday season, treatment and recovery, and how to support someone who has an eating disorder. So to begin with, I'd just like to give a little bit of background of different types of eating disorders. So there's usually two overarching concerns individuals with eating disorders have. That is the fear of weight gain, along with weight and shape concerns. So the most commonly known eating disorders are anorexia nervosa and bulimia nervosa, and binge eating disorders. Anorexia nervosa usually has an onset in early adolescence, and the criteria for diagnosis are a significantly low body weight in the context of age, sex, and physical health, intense fear of weight gain, and disturbed body perception. The criteria for diagnosis of bulimia nervosa is recurrent binges, excessive preoccupation with food, shape, and weight, as well as methods of compensation for eating, such as vomiting, laxatives, or exercise. So bulimia nervosa is often associated with impulse control disorders, drug or alcohol dependence, and anxiety disorders. So while anorexia nervosa is focused around constantly maintaining control, bulimia nervosa includes also the loss of control of eating. So for binge eating disorders, the criteria for diagnosis is recurrent binge eating with control loss, rapid consumption of food, eating until unpleasant or feeling full, for this feeling of fullness has been reached, eating without being hungry, frequent food intake with the consequence of embarrassments and feelings of guilt after a binge. However, with binge eating disorders, there's no compensatory measures for weight reduction, and it's often associated with obesity, affective disorders, and anxiety disorders. So there are also these significant physical consequences of the dietary deficits from eating disorders such as anorexia nervosa. This can be the loss of libido, growth retardation, weaker, more brittle bones, and in severe cases, a loss of function in all organs such as the kidney failure and irregular heartbeats. There are also new types of eating disorders that need to be taken into consideration, such as avoidant or restrictive food intake. This often includes an experience of preoccupation with food or realistic ways of eating without thinking that it could be problematic. If it affects the way you function or your everyday activities in many ways, then more attention, of course, needs to be paid. For example, there's bigorexia, which is an eating disorder commonly seen in men. It's often seen as a body dysmorphic disorder, where the individual is preoccupied with the thought that they're too small or not muscular enough. There's also it is an obsession with only eating high quality food, as well as, let's say, diabulimia, or which occurs in individuals with diabetes when they purposefully restrict insulin in order to lose weight. So even though there are three main, most discussed and diagnosed eating disorders, anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, and binge eating disorders, that does not mean that there aren't any subtypes or varying presentations. As a society, we really have become preoccupied with food intake, and some individuals, this can also result in obsessive behaviors or thoughts about food and body image that we might not even realize can eventually lead to problematic behaviors. But this, under no circumstances, of course, means that we should start over analyzing our behaviors. So just be mindful of the way that these behaviors and thoughts affect your lifestyle or someone's lifestyle and their overall well-being. So that brings me on to eating disorders, thoughts and feelings. There are many consequences to dietary deficiency, which includes loss of brain power that can limit social cognition, and stress in the body also increases threat sensitivity. Individuals may also feel bloated often or have abnormal gastrointestinal sensations. So an important aspect that we want to discuss is food rules and valuation of thinness and muscularity. These rules and values that accompany eating disorders have a significant impact on the way we view ourselves, and they distort our perception of what is good or what is bad, and what is healthy or what is unhealthy. So this leads me then on to my first questions for Ruth. How have these rules changed your perception and your values? Do you value being thin or lean more than anything else? What happened to you when you experienced these rules?
So, when I was in the depths of my eating disorder, I only valued being thin. I can quite clearly remember just wanting to be thin, wanting to be as tiny as possible. I think when you are going through an eating disorder, unfortunately, you become quite selfish and you don't account for other people's feelings. So I didn't take into consideration my family's thoughts or feelings towards how I looked, or seeing me disappear in front of their eyes, I'm sure was a huge challenge and difficult not to go in all guns blazing and try to fix. Um, and yeah, I really didn't care for anything else. Although I knew I had to regain some weight in order to return back to my career. Um, at the time when I was really, really struggling, I really didn't think about what my future looked like. There were times where people told me, if you carry on, you will probably not be here for much longer. And that didn't trigger anything. It didn't sort of switch a light bulb on for me at all. And you would probably think, why not? If someone is telling you that, you might not have much future, surely that would be a possible moment where you think, oh my goodness, I need to get my things in order, and I need to gain some weight and work on my emotions and my mental health. But at the time, yeah, that was my only value. My only rule for myself was to be as tiny as possible. And the eating disorder, you'll never win. So the eating disorder will always win, always be in control, always have one up on you. And actually, now looking back, it's great to look back because you can see how far you've come. I mean, today my values and my morals and my rules are very, very different. So I value health more than anything. And to have a healthy, prosperous future, and just to know that I can be more than being the girl who used to be thin. I know that I have more to deliver and I have more to give than just being someone who used to be good at being really disciplined around food and exercise. So there's been a huge movement there, a huge change from how I used to feel and think to how I actually view eating disorders to this present day.
Right, absolutely. And of course, like you say, your identity and your self-worth just changes so much with these rules. If you, let's say, would break one of these rules or didn't keep to one of them as you wanted to, how did that make you feel?
So again, back when I was really, really struggling, I would punish myself. I would beat myself up for days. If I thought I'd eaten a little bit more than I should have, um, then I would, restrict myself beyond belief. I would probably over exercise. And I think until I saw the scale dropped again from that bout of feeling out of control and perhaps eating a bit more, then I knew that I was back in control and I was back to working hard and being dedicated and committed. Um, I think the eating disorder has a really good way of telling you that you're being lazy, and it's very quick to pull you up on it. So if you feel that you're having a day where you haven't completed your workout, or you haven't, eaten a little bit less that day than you did on the previous day, you haven't worked hard enough. You must struggle and suffer. And I think that's a big issue around eating disorders, is that you never feel good enough. You never feel accepted, although you have an abundance of, so much support around you. I have the most amazing family and friends. They love me no matter what I looked like, and no matter what I achieved in life, and I was very aware of that. But there was something that was always niggling me and thinking, I'm just not good enough. And I just think that went back to the days where I was trying to pursue my career, and being constantly pushed. Yesterday's old news, today is the present, and if you're not delivering as you should be, then it doesn't matter what you achieved a week ago or a month ago. That doesn't matter. It's pushing yourself to your absolute limit. And I think for me, I pushed myself to the limit to pursue my dream, but it also sort of shot out in various different directions. So if I ate a bowl of porridge one day, I would make sure I ate 3/4 of it the next day, and then half the day after that, and then a quarter of it the day after that, just to make sure that I was still pushing myself. I was never content, and I was never constant. And I think that's something that others may be experiencing with eating disorders as well.
Right. Yeah. And also going back to the values, you said to me before that it affected even the way you perceived your performances when you had ballet performances, and the way you valued those dance performances over your thinness. How did that change?
Yeah. So I remember, again, there's not much I do remember when I was really poorly, because like you've already beautifully described, Elissa, you lose part of your cognitive function. So there's a lot that's kind of blacked out throughout that period, which is quite normal if you are going through that. But I remember very, very vividly that I didn't really care that I wasn't producing great work, or I did a great show, or I got on for a particular role. It was all about how I looked, and that's all I could think about. It was just all consuming. You know, if I put on a costume that was slightly less tight than the week before, then I'd achieved. Yet I would have previously said that if I'd got on a role that I was covering before, or I'd never got to dance before, that was an achievement. So the switch between achievements and what my intentions were, and where my mindset was, is very, very shocking, and I would say obviously unhealthy, but very toxic. It's a very miserable place to be. But yeah, I think now, to this present day, I value what I've achieved through my work in the NHS, and if I've helped other people, if I've made a difference. My appearance, okay, I don't think you could ever say you're 100% ever recovered. My appearance will always be important to me, but it's not the number one priority, and it's not all consuming anymore. And I think to me that is progress, and that's all I can ask for in myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Have other people's rules also influenced your own rules, and other people's opinions and the way that they talk? Going back to the fat talk, and how do the two, how did they interlink to one another from other people's um, talking and conversations as well?
Mm. Great question. I think in the arts world, like I said, you have to be aesthetically pleasing. You have to look a certain way, and it can be dangerous if you are carrying a little bit extra weight, because there's so many tricks and involved that do require you to be thrown up in the air. So if you are at a healthy weight, um, that's easy for the guy to partner, it's easier for the girl to manage, and it's less pressure on your joints and your muscles and all those things. But I would never ever deem that being underweight is healthy, and that you can achieve more by being underweight. There were a lot of times where people would come up to me and comment on my weight. At the time where I was losing a lot of weight, they would say, oh, great job, keep going, I can see your bones. You must be doing something right. So whatever you're doing, keep on doing it. You're going to get a lot of work from this. So being in that industry, all you then can think about is thinking, oh, I must be onto a winner here. I'm going to be achieving my dream, and this is all I have to do. What's a couple of kilos, So you lose even more weight, and then people. I think what was shocking really is that people didn't really ask if I was okay. They kind of just said, great job. Whereas if I see someone lose weight, I'm very in tune. And I would ask that person, you know, are things okay? Are you doing all right? Are you managing? Are you coping? Can I do anything to help? But I think back in the day, people were very quick to comment on if you'd lost weight or if you'd gained weight. And for me, that was my entire identity. That was all I was worth. So if there was a change in that identity, I had to quickly adapt and think, oh my gosh, I've gained a bit of weight, so I have to pull that back and be in control, or I've lost a bit of weight, so maybe I can keep going and get more work. So people's opinions and comments and thoughts were very much taken to heart, and I acted on them, whatever they were. And I did what I thought I had to do just to be successful. But again, having a change in mindset to this present day, I think there's so many other ways to be successful. And now I don't think anyone's really ever commented on my weight since recovery, but I think people now know exactly what I've been through. There's no expectations to look a certain way. And it's just wonderful to be reminded of that. Because, you know, there are days where the little gremlin pops up and he says hello, but I now have the tools and strategies to be able to cope and manage myself, and of course with tremendous amount of support from my family and loved ones as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You learn to love yourself again. You learn to have new values.
Absolutely. There was a long time where I didn't love myself. I didn't think I was worth anything, and the only thing I had to bring to the table was how I looked. So now I've had to really work on myself, tell myself that I am worthy, I'm worth being loved and appreciated and accepted. And I think that if anything, when you do recover from an eating disorder, I think if you can discover that for yourself, I think you're onto a winner, and you're only going to grow and get better each day and learn new things about yourself each day. Have time for yourself and take time out, take the pressure off from time to time, is super important, just for your mental well-being as much as your physical well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ruth. Yeah. So, of course, these thoughts and feelings, they're reoccurring, and there's certain habits that are also created, certain rituals which you cannot get rid of. And then there's these feelings of stigma and guilt that also arise when having an eating disorder. The other thing that I would like to cover with you, Ruth, as well, is different types of behaviors that we exhibit when experiencing eating disorders. So these are the repetition of food behaviors that I was talking about before, and those automated habits that we get, such as excessive exercise or keeping cold, often wearing baggy clothes, or refusing to go out and eat in front of other people. So this is just a few different types of behaviors. Of course, we haven't touched upon all the different behaviors, but for you personally, Ruth, what behaviors did you most commonly exhibit, and how did they affect you?
Yeah, so I could probably relate to almost all of those, to be honest, Elissa. I think there was a period where I'd made the decision to come back home and live with my parents back in Sheffield to recover and get the treatment I needed. So the eating disorder kind of continued from then. It wasn't, you know, I returned to Sheffield and everything got better straight away. It actually got a bit worse. I was restricting like you wouldn't believe. I was probably consuming around 150 calories a day at my very worst. My mom, I remember she had to help me out of bed on basically every day. I just didn't have the strength. And my mom and dad actually would rock me to sleep, just because I would be having nightmares. I would be crying so much. I was so exhausted because I was so hungry because I couldn't sleep. It was a vicious circle. So my mom and dad were desperately trying to get me to eat a bit more. There was talks of me being an inpatient, but I knew that was one thing that I really didn't want to do. I didn't want to get treatment and go in and be someone on a ward who was just drip fed, or and you know, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. If you are having to get treatment that way, that's amazing. I think that's the first sign of recovery, and that's absolutely fantastic. But for me, I think I just had so much grit and determination to do it by myself, and I think that might have been the light bulb moment. Doctors were saying, you know, if you don't maintain or even make a bit of progress within the next week, we'll have to determine you as an inpatient. I was still restricted, and I was still weighing myself on a daily basis, sometimes 10 times a day. I couldn't get warm. My parents had the heating on full blast, and they actually joked that it was like tropical weather, but I couldn't feel it. I had about 5 jumpers on and 2 hot water bottles, 3 pairs of socks, 2 duvet covers. I think wearing baggy clothes as well. I didn't really want to face anyone commenting on my appearance, so I just covered it up as best I could. And then a little bit later on in my recovery, I really didn't want to attend social events. I couldn't bear the thought of eating in front of people if they were coming around to see me. If it was at lunchtime and I was on my recovery program and I had to eat lunch, I just couldn't do it in front of them. I had to go and eat in the kitchen, because I was so afraid of what they would say. And they would say, you know, you're doing much better. Doing much better in my eyes was meaning that you were failing, because you were actually gaining weight. So gaining weight was not an option. And for a long time it wasn't. So I think, yeah, one of the main ones was the severe restriction. I knew I was feeling dizzy all the time. I was passing out at times. I was severely dehydrated. I wasn't taking in much water at all. And yeah, I think at the time as well, I wasn't taking any pictures of my body or anything like that, just because social media really wasn't a thing back then, and I didn't really want to look back on the day of when I was really ill. But now I wish I did take a few images just so that I could see how far I've come. But I think a lot of people have a misconception around people who have an eating disorder. They just want to be thin and show how thin they can be, and show others, you know, all their bones and things like that. But the last thing you want to do is expose yourself. You want to cover up and hide away. And I think from all these behaviors, I then developed depression and anxiety quite badly. So yeah, it didn't end when I gained the weight. I think we'll touch on this a little bit later, but the aftermath of and the devastation of what had come of the eating disorder was coming a lot later on in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're going to cover that a little bit when we talk about your recovery as well. And yeah, also the comments from other people who maybe you're just trying to make a nice comment, you're doing well, actually means something positive, but for yourself, it can have such a negative impact of the way you perceive the comment and the way you perceive yourself, and still struggling with finding the values at that point, because it doesn't just switch off or switch from one day to the next to something different. So yeah, just being careful around what is being said, and accepting the behaviors as well, but also maybe addressing them so that people don't hide away from them. Just to have this mindful awareness of them is so important. So also, in order to understand why some people might be more vulnerable to eating disorders than others, or why eating disorders develop, we need to look at different types of risks and maintaining factors. These can be biological, psychological, social, and environmental. Biological factors can be genetic, hunger, satiety, weight or diet changes, also chronic stress from starvation and social pain set in motion processes such as depression and neuroprogression, like changes in the brain structure, which Ruth has said before. The onset of depression and anxiety was also part of her recovery, part of her struggle as well. And there's also psychological factors, can be stress, anxiety, fear, and obsessive compulsive traits or trauma even. So often individuals with eating disorders are focused on control, and they can exhibit obsessive and compulsive behaviors, even traits such as hoarding or obsessive cleaning. And they often have a perfectionistic personality, which Ruth has mentioned a lot about herself before as well. And of course, the trauma plays an important role, and this can even be trauma related to this pandemic itself. So, Ruth, in what way do you think this pandemic could have a significant impact on those more vulnerable to developing an eating disorders or those who already have one?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a very difficult year, hasn't it? And I think if you are struggling with any type of eating disorder, anyway, throw a pandemic into the mix, and it really does test your mental health and your resilience. I think the first lockdown for me was okay because I knew I had the ability to maintain my exercise regime, although it wasn't obsessive, it was very relaxed, but I knew I had a space in my parents' house at the time to do that exercise, which did make me feel good, and it obviously released those endorphins. And I was eating really, really well. I knew actually that I wanted to focus on health through the pandemic, and I wanted to make sure that I was protecting myself. Obviously, you know, the standard guidelines of making sure you're hygienic and washing your hands and maintaining social distance. But I think for me, I really focused on the element of making sure I'm fueling my body with all the right nutrients so that I could give my immune system the chance to be able to fight off anything that it may have been presented with. Of course, there's no evidence that suggests that COVID won't, attack people that have great health. But I knew that's something I wanted to do for myself. I wanted to give myself the best possible chance of staying healthy throughout the first lockdown. And I think actually, you know, being in the summer months, spring and summer months, it did help because we were able to go out for long walks at the end of the day after work, have dinner outside and feel connected and feel that um, you're communicating with others and you have time for yourself within your personal life as well as your working life. So my eating disorder really wasn't a factor, I would say. It didn't bother me, but I would say, you know, going through a second lockdown into the winter months and facing winter pressures, I think it's been slightly different in that, you know, it becomes dark at 4 o'clock now, so I've had to really think about what's the best time for me to get my exercise in, make sure I feel good, take care of myself, focus on self-compassion, and fuel myself properly. But I think if you are struggling and you are, for me, I think not seeing people physically face to face for a while was a real concern. And I think the fear of people commenting on how I looked after a lockdown. I know at the minute I'm helping so many people with their nutrition and making sure they're staying healthy and maintaining a good, healthy weight. It really forced me to think about my own and actually not getting into that obsessive mindset again of thinking I have to come out of this lockdown being perfect, or I have to come out of this lockdown feeling I'm on top of things and I'm in shape and all that sort of thing. And I think there's a lot of pressure with social media these days where people of course are trying to promote their businesses and, you know, try not to put on weight during lockdown, and here's some tips on how not to do that. But I think you need to allow your body to do whatever it needs to do throughout this pandemic. We are all trying our best and we are all trying to get through it as best we can. And I don't think weight should be a focus. I think as long as you're doing the things you know are good for you, so if that's taking a nice long bath or reading a good book or doing some mindfulness, you know, all those good things, doing some yoga, moving your body, getting that blood flow going. I think weight shouldn't really be a focus because health can look different on everyone. And I think that's another important thing to note, is that everyone's recovery will be different. Everyone's set point, set weight will be different. And that's okay. You know, you don't have to conform to this pressure of feeling like you need to look a certain way, especially going through a pandemic. It's hard enough trying to cope with the stresses and strains of that without feeling like you need to be on top of your game with your weight and your nutrition. My advice would be, just to do what you can, do the best you can. But if you're having a day where you just need to put your PJs on and eat ice cream, you know, go for it. Just be confident and comfortable with how you're dealing with it. And I don't think that weight should be the focus. So that would be what I would say to people. If you are struggling through the pandemic, be kind to yourself and take the pressure off.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really good advice to give, of course. And there's been a lot of discussions around. There's basically two extremes at the moment, where some people are like, "Oh, I've gained so much weight. I've done nothing during lockdown. I'm always just sitting around and eating." And on the other hand, you have people who are like, "I'm constantly exercising. I'm eating the healthiest I've ever ate." So people are constantly talking about this right now, and this brings us back again to the comments and also the fat talk, even, and that could trigger certain emotions within people who are more vulnerable to these types of behaviors. I also really want to talk about Christmas time and being home again with friends and family. And it's a season where we eat together and we drink together. There's a lot of sweets, and people end up, and we talked about eating in front of other people as well, that was a struggle as well. And how does this Christmas period, how could that affect people with eating disorders?
Yeah, so this is a real personal one, actually, because I think for me, Christmas time is always the hardest time, because it was the time where I was in the depth of my eating disorder. So I thought it was a great thing that I could, you know, restrain from eating a Christmas dinner and not eat the chocolates and not eat the sweets and all the amazing things that Christmas brings, that you should be allowed to enjoy without feeling any guilt around. So for me, it was like an achievement if I didn't eat those things, because I was strong. I had the willpower not to give in. So my eating disorder brain was, saying, good job, you didn't eat all that dinner, so that's a win. But yeah, so it's a very sensitive one for me, Christmas, because I think it's taken me years to get to the point where I just see food as food. I would never count the calories for the day. I would just listen to my body. I think that's what I tend to practice nowadays, is intuitive eating. I listen to my body. If it's hungry, I'll eat. If it's full, I'll stop. If I'm feeling like I want something sweet, I'll have something sweet. And there will be days where you overdo it, and there'll be days where you underdo it. That's just life. But I think try not to overanalyze what you're doing. I would say would be my biggest piece of advice. Just go with it, and there'll always be a time in the new year where you can, if you want to make your health a priority and whatever, I think great, that's amazing. But if not, also amazing. I think again, just being confident and accepting who you are, knowing that you're doing whatever you can, but also allowing yourself to enjoy Christmas. And I think especially this year, we all have a lot to be grateful for. We all have a lot to be thankful for, and celebrate all the amazing things you've achieved throughout the year, and helping others and trying to get them through their years and their struggles. I think it can be very daunting because there's so much food around, but actually, if your Christmas is looking a little bit smaller this year, if you're having it, just with a few members of your family, I'm sure those members of your family will understand if you say, I'm not quite ready to eat that yet, or I've had enough. And sitting with that, accepting those feelings. If you don't feel like you can, go all in on Christmas Day, that's okay. Don't put the pressure on yourself to be able to feel that you can do it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So this brings us on to also your journey of recovery. So, of course, eating disorders, they are persistent and it can really take many years for recovery. So it's important to get a better understanding of what these maintaining factors are that we were talking about before. And this can really help with the recovery process. Of course, there are also other complications with the recovery process. So often the eating disorders are associated with other mental health conditions such as depression, anxiety, and OCD, and this can make treatment a little bit more complicated. But there's many different options that you have, which we'll talk about a little bit later when we go into treatment. So, Ruth, for you, how long has the recovery process been, and do you still feel like this is an ongoing process for you?
Yeah, so I'm now 10 years into my recovery. It was, 10 years a few months ago. It was around my 21st birthday that I was very, very poorly. And I've just turned 31. So actually, on my 31st birthday, I just had a moment in the shower and I thought, oh, it's been 10 years since I've started my recovery. Um, and it's been very up and down. There was probably a few years where I was kind of flying and I was making progress all the time. But then there was a few years where I was having ups and downs and mini relapses. And I think within that time, it not only helped myself understand the eating disorder a bit more, it helped my family and my loved ones, because I think some people did think that, oh, she's gained the weight now, she's okay, that's done with, let's put a full stop, um draw a line under that terrible experience and let's move on. And I think to some extent that's healthy to move on and to think that's in the past. You've grown so much stronger, you've been through so much, but let's focus on the future. But actually I think it's so important to revisit those feelings and to make people aware that may not necessarily know a lot about eating disorders and how you're feeling. Although I look very healthy and I am very healthy, I'm well, my mental health is very positive at the minute. I think sometimes there are still challenges that I'm faced with, and I have to make a decision whether I will let the eating disorder take control or whether Ruth as a person will be in control. 99% it's me, Ruth. But I think if you're in the earlier stages of recovery, those questions and challenges are very, very difficult. I didn't ever have like a full-blown relapse or anything. There were mini dips, but I was lucky enough not to have a really, really big relapse and go back into those patterns of destructive behavior, things like that. Like I said, I was very lucky to have so much support, family, friends, and now colleagues. I don't think it's ever gone from people's minds. I think it's always there. But I think the more research that other people can do, the more it can help you feel more comfortable and confident talking about it. I will have days where I probably call up my sister and I'll say, oh, I'm struggling a bit today, and she'll reassure me and she'll know exactly what to say. But that's all down to her from researching it and from watching me over the years and how I've coped with things. So yeah, I think it's never going to go like that. It's never going to be linear. I think everyone's recovery is very individual. But it's taken years, and I think if you are going through facing an eating disorder, try not to put that expectation on that it's going to be fixed within 1 or 2 years, because it won't work like that. All you have to do is just work on the skills and the tools and the strategies to help yourself manage your eating disorder. And it's great because you can challenge yourself and look back on how far you've come, and things that probably may have been triggering in the past that aren't now in the present, I think is a huge achievement. So I'm able to cope with things a lot better and not feel so anxious all the time, because there were definitely points where I couldn't cope, and I was having panic attacks quite a lot.
Mm. Yeah, it's definitely a long process, and it's persistent as well. Eating disorders are very persistent, so it can, like you said, can keep going through ups and downs. But be kind to yourself, and make sure that you also reflect on the little accomplishments that, like you said, looking back at certain things that triggered you that don't trigger you now, and making sure you take note of those, and that those show your progress as well. So are there specific things that helped you specifically during the progress, or what didn't help you? Was there any points that didn't help you at all, and was there something that did help you, basically?
Um, I think what did help me is doing my own research. So I ended up going to university to study nutrition and diet and lifestyles. And I think that 3-year period where I learned so much, and of course at the end got my degree and my qualifications, um, from going back to thinking all I was doing and all I was trying to pursue was becoming a professional dancer. I didn't have that much time to study and, you know, discover things about myself. And actually coming out of the study period of 3 years at university, although the achievement to get the degree was amazing, I never thought I would in my lifetime achieve that. Um, but the growth in that 3 years of knowing how to take care of my own body, I think maybe when I went to university, I still wasn't 99% recovered. I was still battling with things. So learning more about which nutrient serves what purpose, how food affects your body, weight management, it really opened so many doors to me, because I had in my head of the rules and the values, they were very much still prominent. What I could and couldn't do, what I was allowed to do, what I wasn't allowed to do. So the course actually in itself really made me reevaluate how I was treating myself and how I was fueling myself. And of course, I wanted to set a good example for others as well. Um, yeah, it was just amazing and such a good experience. Um, and to be able to come out of the other end with qualifications around how to look after yourself, how to, um, go to people, how to notice if other people are struggling, how to talk about that issue. And yeah, it's given me so many life skills. So that course, that experience, I would say was the biggest helper. And of course, not to mention my family's support, my friends' support. um I think what didn't really help was facing treatment when you weren't ready, when I wasn't ready. So I knew I had to get better, I knew I had to gain some weight, um but I was not in the right place to see a therapist. I was very defensive, um and very angry. I was sort of angry at the world. And although I knew this psychologist was there to help, I saw her as the enemy. And it's heartbreaking for me to say that now, because now knowing what I do as a job, that is my job, to help other people. And yeah, so that's interesting to make that comparison. But I think when you're not ready for something, there's a difference between having a little bit of a push, and being out of your comfort zone and trying something to see if it works, to being exposed to something that you're really not ready for and trying to work through your issues that you're not ready to talk about. So I think I would have waited a little bit to see a therapist before I did back in the day. I'm not saying I'd change anything about my treatment or recovery, but if there was anything I would think you may need to think about, is trying to seek help when you're ready for it, and being in the right mindset to take that on, because it's exhausting and it's a really traumatic experience. And you will talk about things that you didn't necessarily think you would think related to your eating disorder. So you have to be ready for that, and you have to be strong enough to be able to take that on. So that's what I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Really good advice, because also, of course, treatment will not be effective if you're not mentally or psychologically ready for it. And all psychologists and doctors, we all know that. So when the person is not ready to receive help and treatment and is not coming there by themselves, it will often be difficult to also treat the person. So once you're ready for it, once you're ready to receive treatment, it will be the most effective way and better for you to recover, of course. And this, of course, then brings us on to different types of treatments. There's really a long list of treatments that are specifically for eating disorders here. And just to give a little bit of background of some of them, so eating disorder focused cognitive behavioral therapy targets behaviors such as eating patterns and compensatory behaviors, as well as thoughts and emotions that maintain eating disorders. So while you go through a CBT-ED program, a person will receive meals or snacks that are planned. They will receive psychoeducation, which Ruth was talking about, has helped her with her recovery as well. And they will address also dieting habits as well as food avoidance and overvaluation of weight or shape. So there's also self-guided help, which is focused around behavior change and education as well. And the benefits of self-guided help is that it's really sustainable and the materials can be accessed by the individual at any time or when necessary. Of course, this is also still under the supervision of a therapist or a support group. So you have touched upon the subject of treatment for yourself as well a little bit. When you were ready to receive treatment, how was treatment for you? What was your personal experience with it?
Yeah, so when I was ready for it and I finally accepted that I needed this to get better, I was very naive because I was that person that thought anorexia was all about appearance and how you looked. So I thought in my head that once I'd gained the weight, I'd return back to my old self and I would just go on with my life as if nothing had happened. I really wasn't aware of the effects of mental health, and to this day, how I'm affected. I sometimes still struggle with anxiety. Luckily, I know how to manage it and cope. But I think unless you don't do the research and you kind of just believe that once you're at a healthy weight, things will return back to normal, I think there'll be further complications down the road. For me, it wasn't just about seeing someone, it was about seeing the physical changes within myself as well. So when I was really poorly, I lost a lot of my hair. My skin was very dull, my eyes were grey. My physical appearance was I looked very ill. Even when I was gaining the weight, I just didn't look healthy. I didn't have great skin, anything like that. I didn't feel like I had a lot of energy. Even though I was putting the fuel in at that time, I still felt the need to just stay in bed and just not face the day. So I think seeing the fact that I was getting, my hair was coming back, my eyes were getting my sparkle back. That's something my mum always used to tell me, you've got your sparkle back. My skin was getting better, I had more energy. I was doing research in my own time. I was doing a lot of self-help, reading a lot of books, listening to podcasts. People speak on YouTube, motivational speakers. I think doing as much of the work as you can. I think the therapists are there to help you, but they're not necessarily there to give you all the answers, which would be amazing if we could just swallow a pill and all our problems will be solved. But there's a lot of work that you need to do yourself. And like I said before, you need to be ready to take that on. So if you're not quite there yet, that's absolutely fine, as long as you're not in danger, to yourself, with your health, your weight. As long as you're at a stable period where you're maintaining your weight, or even making progress in your recovery, then you can maybe have the headspace and the capacity to work things through yourself and really do the research yourself. Yeah,
Absolutely. Good advice. So this brings us on to lastly how to support someone with eating disorders, how we can support them through the treatment as well, through the recovery, and how to talk with people who have eating disorders as well, because often there's some things that you might say which would trigger them, and then it's just about being conscious of the different social interactions that you have with people, because often eating disorders lead to the sense of isolation for these individuals, and because they have so many psychosocial difficulties, and they experience depression as well as anxiety. Often they might also have alcohol related disorders, and it can even be difficult for the caregivers to look after them, and can even lead to something called carer burnout, where they withdraw from the person, and these feelings of loneliness and isolation are just then worsened for these individuals. This is why family and carers, they play such a vital role in guiding the person through their recovery process. For you, Ruth, you've kept mentioning, of course, that your family and your mom, your sister, and your dad, everyone played such a vital role with your recovery. Has this helped to help you from relapsing, or has this helped you to actually find the treatment that you needed to find?
Yeah, 100%. You know, even when I'm struggling, I think my family must have superpowers of something, because they can immediately tell. It's been difficult with lockdown because obviously we're only seeing each other over FaceTime or Zoom or whatever. But they can read me like a book. They can sense my body language. And they will ask me if I'm okay. And I now feel, of course, open and confident and comfortable enough to just say, you know what, I'm struggling a little bit. I think I never really thanked them from, you know, going through the recovery period, because they must have seen things that were truly heartbreaking. And of course, when you are the person who's going through it, you don't take that into consideration. And I must admit, I didn't when I was going through it, and all I could focus on was the eating disorder. So I think I'd just like to say a huge thank you, because I genuinely don't think that I would have made this amount of progress if it wasn't for them. But they did a lot of the work themselves as well. They went to focus groups, they went to support group sessions, they've read books on it. If ever I come across some research, or if ever I come across a podcast that I think will be useful to listening to, I share it and they're up for it. And they're very, very good at being kind to me and reassuring me that I'm doing my best, and you know, re-emphasizing the fact that I am here because I've done the work myself. Sometimes I don't see that. Yeah, so I just think they've been absolutely fantastic. And I'm eternally grateful, because I don't know if I would be here today if I hadn't have had that support group there, that support network. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so important. And it's really amazing that your family also went through all the education and support groups and everything themselves, so that they could find a way to help you as well, and to show you that there are people around you who love you, who care for you, who want you to be better and to feel good about yourself. I'm sorry, I'm just conscious of the time. I know I'm going over here, and the conversation has just been so good. So I wanted to actually bring in some Q&As and show you some support, some signposting that you can do. You have some personal experience with BEAT as well, Ruth, right?
Yes, yeah. My mum and I actually campaigned for them, went down to Houses of Parliament, just to petition for bringing down the waiting list time to get seen for treatment. I know that when I was looking for treatment, they said that I actually didn't meet criteria. I wasn't sick enough. So that actually was, I mean, the worst thing you could tell someone with an eating disorder, of course, but I ended up having to get more, I had to get more sick in order to get treatment. So I think for me, if that's going to be one of my life missions, is to make sure that people don't feel they need to become more ill to get the help they need.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I would like to open up the session for a few minutes of Q&A. If people still have time and to be on this session with us, please feel free to post your questions in the Q&A box or raise your hand if anyone has some personal experience that they want to share or some advice that they want to give. Please feel free to contribute now. I have a few people who raised their hand. Hi, Kim. You can unmute yourself and you can talk to the microphone when you want.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you? I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for letting me dial in. It's been emotional, but I'd just like to say that I'm so proud of Ruth for telling her story. There was a period of time where she couldn't speak about it. None of us could speak about it. So I just wondered if I could just give a few points and a few things that might help people who are going through, you know, a similar situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Please do.
Okay. So the first thing I'd like to say is do lots of research. I did read a few books, but there's so much information out there online. There are so many people that you can go to for help. You've touched on the Beat. We had a local support group called SIGNPOSTING, who were absolutely amazing. I can't thank them enough. They're based in Sheffield. And I went on a carers course, and they actually taught me, and I did a course called Treading on Eggshells, which is exactly what it is. Living with somebody who has an eating disorder, you are treading on eggshells every single day. You're not sure how to deal with it, especially, you know, when it's first presented to you. So if anybody has a chance to look online, and if it's still available, I would highly recommend that. I would say if you have got somebody in your family that has an eating disorder, just the first thing I would say is don't judge. It is a serious mental health condition. Obviously, we were so worried and so upset. We were trying everything to try and make it better. But I think what you've got to understand too is that only the person who is suffering can get better themselves. They've got to want to get better. There's nothing that you can do to force them to get better. And if they can accept that, then you can support them along the way. And like you've touched on earlier, it does take an awful long time. I remember going to Saida and them saying, oh, you know, it will take 5-10 years, and thinking, never, you know, I'm not going to let her be ill for all that time. I'm going to sort this out. I'm going to do it. I'm going to make her better. I think that's a mum thing. You know, you will try everything in your power to help your child to get better from something. But as time went along, I realised that it was going to take a long time. And just you can just be there to help. One of the other good things that I was taught was try to be a carer, not a mother. And I thought, how on earth am I going to do that? You know, I've been a mum to her for 21 years, but it was very, very difficult, but I did do it. If you take a step back and come out of that nurturing side and think, right, I am a carer, I am going to do everything possible to get her better. It was very, very difficult, but I think Ruth will probably say that I did do it, and the mothering part does come back after a while. You've got to take a mental step back before you decide what to do to help somebody too, and also be guided by what they want. We went from having a very confident daughter who went away at 11 to school. We saw her quite regularly, but she didn't have the family upbringing that
So
most.
I'm not
most
sure if you
girls have.
can hear me.
Yeah.
My screen has frozen, so I can't hear anything, or I'm not sure what's happened.
Oh, Kim is still talking about
Sorry.
giving advice. Are you able to hear any of us?
No, I can't hear Kim. I can hear you.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Sorry.
Maybe try switching your camera on and off to see if that works.
Yeah, my buttons are also frozen, so I can't do that.
Oh wow. Okay. Hopefully it will unfreeze in a second. I'm not quite sure what to do in that case.
No problem.
Sorry, Kim. Sorry for
Sorry.
Just saying, you know, just take a mental step back before you decide what to do. Have your boundaries, don't overstep them, and don't react to controversial things that they might do. You know, there were times then when Ruth would like to shock me with things, but I just used to just ignore it. And that was hard, but I found that did actually work, because she was wanting the shock factor all the time. And I think if you take a step back from that, that's also being part of being a carer, not a mom. Then for me, that did help massively. And all I can say really is you just do your best, get the support and the medical help that you can from your GP and all the support networks. And that's all I can say really, Elissa. It's a long journey, but I'm so proud of Ruth of how far she's come, and she's done it all herself. Yeah, we have helped her, but she's been the one that's making the recovery.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kim. That has been really, really useful advice, and really appreciate your input in this as well, and your personal experience. I'm sure it will help a lot of other people as well.
No problem. Thank you.
I think there's someone else who raised their hand. Agnes, would you like to contribute as well to this session?
Hi, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hi. First of all, thank you very much for this session today. It's been really an eye-opening and really good to reflect on, I guess, what everyone can go through, especially when you're struggling with the disorders, and the help that we can provide to those around us. So thank you very much for that. I've got a question around the duty of care, either as individuals or as a gym member. So my husband recently joined one of the spinning classes, and he said that he came back home one day and he's noticed that there's a lady that keeps going to these classes. She's extremely thin and she does actually look ill, and that she exercises repeatedly. He can see her there, pretty much all the time, and she's not even participating as part of the class. She's just doing her own thing. And he was just wondering whether he's got any duty to potentially speak to the members of the staff or speak to her and find out what support we could provide, or he could provide in such circumstances. So I was interested to see your views.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's no specific duty of care that you personally have in this case, but it's obviously good to take notice of these things, and then it depends on your relationship with this person as well. So if you don't know the person, they don't know you well, it's best to approach them also directly, so that they don't feel like you're talking behind their backs, and just to state what the goal of the conversation is. The problem is, though, that sometimes people they're not ready yet to receive help or treatment, so it can be quite sensitive to these individuals. But if you feel comfortable enough to approach this person and say that you just want to support them or signpost them somewhere, and that the goal of this conversation is to help them to find help, it could work. But at the same time, like Kim said, it's like treading on eggshells, because that could trigger something in the person, and then they might feel offended. So it really depends also on your relationship with this individual.
And if there's no relationship, if we just literally just notice a person being in their own kind of world, is it best to avoid, or, you know, any discussion, or what would you do in that situation?
Well, usually it's I would try to signpost people from a sort of outside perspective, not targeting specific people, but maybe you could put up flyers in the gym of, you know, look after yourself. This is where you can find support for eating disorders. This is where you can find support if you're feeling anxious. So different types of flyers or signposting, just messages around the gym to subliminally tell individuals to look for help.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Ruth, I'm not sure if you can hear anymore.
I can hear you, Elissa. I just can't hear the people asking questions. I'm so sorry. I don't know
Really?
what.
Oh no. I don't know what to do about that. That's never happened before to me. Maybe you can catch up on everything later on as well.
Absolutely.
But, I'm just worried that we're also running quite overtime at the moment. So I'm thinking that if there's any more questions, because I can see that there's some, but we probably won't have time to go through all of them, please send them in to me or Ruth. My email address is elissa@thrive.uk.com, and Ruth and I can get back to you on these questions as well. So thank you everyone for contributing to this session. Really appreciated your input, and thank you so much, Ruth, for sharing your story. I'm sorry that we had internet connection problems in the end, but yeah, we can catch up on the recording later on as well, and any questions coming through email as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, and apologies for the the internet struggles. It's the bane of my life at the minute, but yeah, I hope that's been a really useful and insightful session, and I hope that it may have helped someone out there who's struggling, or helped carers out there who are trying to support. But just thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure to speak about my experience and my journey. And I hope everyone has a lovely Christmas, and take care of yourselves. Be kind to yourselves.